On this evening's program, Goldie's back from her nap yesterday. High earnings, low inflation, moderate interest rates, and a do-nothing Congress gridlocked on things like higher taxes and anti-business regulations. We're going to get all this today as Goldilocks had a great bounce back, still the greatest story never told. Joining me to discuss, Don Luskin, Chief Investment Officer at Trend Macro, Arthur Laffer, former Reagan Economic Advisor and Chief Investment Officer of Laffer Investments, and Michael Pansner, Wall Street trader and author of Financial Armageddon. So today, Don, looking at consumer goods, in the Producer Price Index, consumer goods, something of a proxy for the Consumer Price Index, the core rate fell by 0.1%. The 12-month change is only 1.4, which is even lower than the core CPI, which is 2.1. So what do you make of Art Laffer's scenario?
Oh, this hurts, Larry. Disagreeing with somebody as eminent and someone I've admired for so many years as I have Art Laffer is very, very difficult and risky for me, but I am going to have to do it. I don't agree with him that everything is rosy on the inflation front and that will allow the Fed to cut rates. I don't agree with your other guest that everything is going to hell in a handbasket and that will force the Fed to cut rates. I think inflation is going to be persistent. I understand that it's not at emergency levels, but I don't see any reason why it should fall from here, and I will let you in on a little secret. I was having a conversation recently with a very senior person at the Fed who must remain nameless, and he told me a very interesting thing about inflation persistent at 2.5%. He said, this isn't the fashion industry. We can't say that brown is the new black. We cannot say that 2.5 is the new 1. The Fed is starting to get afraid that people are getting complacent about inflation, that they're rebasing their expectations at 2.5 as okay, and 2.5 is not okay. And as soon as the Fed sees that the housing contagion isn't going to kill the economy, they're going to start gradually raising rates.
I'm going to just guess, Art, that this 2.5% number has to do with the inflation index tip spread, the so-called tips inflation spread.
Of course it does, yes.
In the spot 10-year market, it's about 240 basis points.
Right.
Of course, that's a CPI. The CPI tends to overstate. But what is your response to Don Luskin? He's worried about inflation complacency, and he guessed the Fed is too.
Well, I thought the introduction to me was very, very sweet and nice, and I love it. Thank you. You know, I think we have reason to worry about inflation. There's never a time that you can't be careful and cautious.
Don Luskin, what did you learn? I mean, to read the newspaper headlines this week with same-store chain sales down, and today had a sort of soft retail sales. Is the consumer collapsing? Is the economy collapsing? Or might the first quarter actually be the inflection point? Maybe the 1.3 in Q1 is going to be the worst. How do you see this? Consumer dead? What's the deal here?
You left out one of the possibilities, which is that the media that does all this frenzied frothing at the mouth reporting about the collapsing consumer just simply has it wrong. I did a little exercise. I went back a month, and you remember this same news that was bad this month was great last month. And last month, all the media outlets, all the Wall Street economists were saying, oh, no, this isn't as good as it looks because Easter came early this year, so don't trust these March numbers. Well, now the April numbers are out, and there's not one word about the fact that Easter came early this year. Not one word about the fact that this was the 5th worst April in the last 25 years in terms of weather. Not one word. When the bad news comes out, it's too good to fact check.
Arthur likes it. Mike Pansner doesn't like gridlock, Don Luskin. Where do you come out on the gridlock story?
I love it. And I want everyone to understand that we have even better than gridlock right now. We have double gridlock. We not only have Republicans gridlocking with Democrats, we have Democrats gridlocking with Democrats. They cannot get their act together. What that means is that in this budget cycle, they haven't had the internal cohesion and the discipline to manage this year's budget cycle under reconciliation procedures. That means that whatever they want to do for taxes is going to require 60 votes in the Senate.
Rather than 51 simple majority.
Right. You can't, I mean, what a sigh of relief. That just happened 24 hours ago. It's huge because you know what Charlie Rangel wants to do with AMT. Well, the Republicans in the Senate aren't going to let him do that now. God bless him on trade. I'm all for that. On the AMT, he's scary.
When President Bush vetoed the Iraq War funding bill, which included, of course, $25 billion of pork, it was his first pork barrel veto. I would argue on security grounds the market liked it because the market fears allowing the al-Qaeda terrorists to run wild, but also on fiscal grounds it seemed like Bush had a little more oomph than we've seen recently. Was that a factor? Did stocks like that? Is that the kind of thing stocks want? Take that veto pen out and keep using it.
Oh, you bet, man. That's the bulwark against disaster. Another thing that was in that bill that he vetoed was raising the minimum wage, and that shows you how uncoordinated the Democrats are, where they took something that they could have just blasted through in the first week of the new Congress, and instead they used it as a bargaining chip for this crazy jihad they're on against the war in Iraq to please their ultra-left base. So they're sacrificing everything to that god, and it's a huge political mistake for them, and I'm so glad they're making it.
I'm Luskin of Trend Macro and his own column and his own blog site, the aforementioned Lawrence O'Donnell and Craig Crawford. Craig's from Congressional Quarterly. He's the author of a new book, The Politics of Life. Everyone should buy it. All right, Don Luskin, weigh in for us. This is an insane story from a Wall Street Journal editorial. Our friend Joel Mowbray is supposed to be here to defend it, but whatever. We put this TV station up like the Voice of America,
right,
and now they're taking the jihadist side. What is up with this?
I think what's up with this is that America's getting the reputation of being the country that couldn't nation build straight. We've got to do something right in the Middle East. And this is just adding to the pressure that the president is getting both from Democrats and Republicans to either do it right or get out.
What about sending CNBC's Kudlow Company into the Middle East? We can promote free market capitalism, economic relationships, and free trade, because that's something that's very missing over there.
Yeah, I want to hear you dubbed in Farsi. I think that'd be great.
I'd be happy to be dubbed in Farsi. I mean, Don Luskin, don't we need economic and trade relations? Wouldn't markets solve a lot of these problems over there?
Absolutely. That's what we ought to be doing. And this idea that somehow it's fair and balanced to balance off capitalism, democracy on the one hand, with terrorism on the other, you don't give equal time to evil. You give the people there who are hungry for what we do well, which is capitalism and freedom, you give them capitalism and freedom.